Hi guys, welcome back to Black Coffee Builds. My name is Henry. It's that time of year again when you want to work on your garden, but maybe you're like me and you're running out of space to put new plants. Or maybe you're checking your homeowner's insurance policy daily to see if rabbits are considered a natural disaster. Either way, a raised garden bed like this is going to give you what you need, and I'm going to show you how to build it, starting now. The first thing to do is rip the boards down to size. The longer piece of cedar is going to get cross-cut to 4 feet, and the shorter piece will be 17.5 inches long. Use the boards you cut first as a reference for the subsequent cuts. After cutting the boards, glue and clamp them together. Put something heavy on the boards to help prevent them from buckling. Before the glue up, play around with the pieces and arrange the finished top and bottom boards in the way that you think looks best. The next step I took was to cut the legs. The legs I cut were 29 inches long. Ideally, I would use 2x4s for these, but the 2x4s were a little worse for wear at my big box store. So I used 2x6s and ripped them in half and it worked fine, but it did make assembly a little more complicated. Once the legs are cut to length, you're going to glue and screw them together perpendicularly, like so. This process is a lot easier if you drill pilot holes, and looks nicer if you countersink the holes. Next, cut a couple 2x4s to 46 inches to stretch across the bottom interior of the cedar boards. These will act as support beams for the boards that will hold the dirt inside the bed. Next, I cut out the top frame using 1x3s. In the past I've used 1x4s for this, and those look good as well. Adjust your miter saw to 45 degrees using a speed square. I started at 52 inches for the outer length of the board and later realized that was what worked for the 1x4s, so I had to trim it down a bit to make it work for the 1x3. After cutting the frame, do a quick dry fit to make sure that your miters turned out well and make any necessary adjustments. After cutting and gluing everything, it's time to sand. Just go with whatever grit you're comfortable with. Since this is an outdoor piece and there will be natural wear and tear, I just used coarse grit on everything and left it at that. After sanding, it's time to stain the boards. I used this Australian timber oil that I've used on past projects for the cedar faces, which looks great and works well for outdoor pieces. And I used an oil-based ebony varathane for the legs and trim to provide a nice contrast. I just used one coat of each because that's what I've done for previous garden beds and the color holds up well, but you could of course do more. Next, I cut 2x4s into 12 17 3/8 inch pieces. These will be what prevents the dirt from falling out of the bed. I didn't stain part of the interior of the legs because I figured the glue might bond better without the stain there. I didn't fully think this through though, as you'll see in a bit. You could probably get away with just screwing or gluing the boards, but I want this to be as strong as possible. This is the part where not using 2x4s for the legs became a little tricky. The legs end up being a little short, so you need to screw it in at an angle if you use 2x6s. It helps a lot to use some clamps as a second pair of hands here if you can. While that dries, we can screw in the cross supports. And here we will cut and stain the trim pieces out of a few 1x2s. When screwing in the top trim, consider screwing it only to the cedar faceboard. If you screw it into the face and the legs, it may warp a little if everything isn't perfectly level. Use the speed square to help reference the placement of each trim piece. Attach the face trim after the stain dries. And finally, screw in the bottom support boards, leaving a little bit of space between each board to allow for drainage. I used a little scrap strip of plywood that was about 3/8 of an inch thick for even spacing. And that's it. Rub in a little mineral oil and you're ready to go. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know in the comments how this project turned out for you and what you're going to be planting in your garden this year. Links to some of the materials I used can be found below. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and if you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing. I'll see you guys on the next project right here on Black Coffee Builds.